Hello and welcome to Green Shift, where we try to make sense of sustainability. I'm your host, David Austin, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Dr. Victor Nian, founding co-chairman of the Center for Strategic Energy and Resources, CSER, and policy wonk and Green Shift executive producer, Jordan Kronen. And I'm really excited today that we are welcoming two guests from the Economic and Commercial Office from the Embassy of Spain in Singapore, and that is Economic Counselor Antonio García Rebollar and Trade Consultant Daniel Yáñez. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to talk to you because we have not spoken to anyone from Europe yet, and really excited to learn about the different collaborations that are going on between Spain and Singapore and other countries in our region. And I thought if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners a bit about your roles at the Embassy of Spain in the Economic and Commercial Office and the broader trade and sustainability agenda that Spain is pursuing in ASEAN.
Sure. At the Economic and Commercial Office of the Embassy of Spain in Singapore, our mission is to strengthen the business and economic ties between Spain and Singapore, and more broadly, even to the ASEAN region. We are a government body, and we represent business interests in the country. And in our office, we assist mainly the Spanish companies when they establish operations in Singapore, and we try to find always the right partners and customers. We engage with government and non-government entities, and we try to facilitate collaboration between the public and private sectors of both countries.
From our government body, as this podcast is also centered in the rest of the ASEAN region, not only Singapore. We also have offices in Bangkok, in Kuala Lumpur, in Manila, in Jakarta, and in Vietnam. So you can understand that Spain has a lot of interest in promoting economic and commercial ties with ASEAN, and particularly in the energy sector, where we believe that Spain is one of the leading countries in expertise due to its long experience in renewable energy installation and integration. And since there is a lot of potential in the ASEAN region and a growing demand of clean energy, we believe that this is a sector that we must focus on.
Very good. And we're going to talk a lot more about renewables in just a moment. But before we do, I wanted to give you both a chance to tell us about the event that's coming up on the 16th July, this major Spain-Singapore Business Summit. Can you tell us what is the goal of the summit, what kind of companies are coming, and why the renewable energy sector is such a central focus this year?
Well, the summit is designed to showcase Spain's capabilities in sectors that matter deeply to the future of Asia in general, including transport, infrastructure, life sciences, and renewable energy. And our aim is to go beyond business as usual and foster real collaboration between governments, between companies, and across sectors. Why are renewables at the top of that list? Well, because ASEAN's energy demand is rising fast, and there is an urgent need to decouple growth from emissions. Energy demand is expected to rise enormously in the region as a consequence of the use of AI, the constructions of data centers, and the plans to keep advancing energy-intensive industries.
And yeah, in this context, we wanted to highlight that Spain has world-class expertise in sectors such as solar, wind, hydrogen, biofuels, and green technologies. And this is because our government, our country, has been pushing renewables since the 1990s. So in the 2000s already, there were a lot of plans and incentives and feed-in tariffs that helped the deployment of renewable energies in the country. And this led to our companies being some of the leaders in the renewable energy sector. For instance, the largest multinational that has a fossil-free past in renewable energy generation is Acciona Energía, which is a Spanish company. Given this long experience, we believe that we can make a real difference in the region.
The growing energy demand here in ASEAN is a big focus of what we're talking about. Victor, do you want to say anything about the growing energy demand here in ASEAN first before we talk a little bit more about the summit?
Right now in the region, we do see a few momentum in the developments in energy space. So if you look across ASEAN, we have a generally well endowment of renewable energy. For example, hydropower in Laos, solar PV generally across ASEAN, offshore wind in the coast of Vietnam, Philippines, and maybe even Gulf of Thailand. And then, of course, geothermal energy in the Philippines and Indonesia. So in terms of endowment as a region, we do have quite well access to renewable energy. But then again, quickly realize that not all the renewable energy are available equally to all the ASEAN members. So this also creates a challenge because the energy intensive users, for example, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, where Spain has an embassy, these are heavy energy consumers, but there's insufficient renewable energy. So that means the renewable energy needs to be brought into this place. And that's also where we are hoping that, for example, the ASEAN Power Grid will be an avenue to help ASEAN bring even and just access to renewable energy across the different parts of the region. And then, of course, we're also hoping that, because we have a renewable target, and all the ASEAN member states have a net zero target, 2060, 2050, 2070. So there is a lot of need for ramping up renewable energy investment as well as upgrading the energy infrastructure so that we are able to take that sheer amount of renewable energy without problems to the grid.
Back to the business summit one more time. Could you give us a preview of some of the Spanish companies that are attending the summit, and especially the ones that are involved in renewable energy or sustainability, and what makes their solutions relevant for Southeast Asia?
I would say the first and most important, given that we are in Singapore, is EDP Renewables. This company is one of the largest energy players when it comes to solar PV in Singapore, following its acquisition in 2021 of the local Sunship. And they have developed large-scale solar projects as well in Vietnam, and they are very interested in advancing new technologies in for example, in energy storage and the floating solar. Also, Acciona Energía, which I mentioned before as one of the largest MNCs in energy generation, is very present in countries such as Philippines and Thailand with the deployment of wind and solar farms. And some that are not present in Singapore but are also present in the rest of ASEAN include IDOM, which has long expertise in nuclear as well as in hydrogen, and they are very focused in Sarawak, for example, for the Asia's hydrogen hub, and in partnership with Moltex are looking into expanding the small modular reactors into Southeast Asia, which I believe that Victor has a long expertise in this sector. So
I think we should also mention two big companies in biofuels.
Mhm.
One is Moeve, Moede, used to be called CEPSA before. And the second one is Repsol, our largest oil and gas company in Spain. And both of them are global leaders in oil and gas, but now they are transitioning into the biofuels ecosystem.
we have to highlight the potential of the ASEAN region in terms of feedstock availability. So it's a sector that is going to grow a lot with the demand for example, sustainable aviation fuels, as well as for the decarbonization of the maritime sector.
To connect to what Daniel was saying about biofuel, yes, that is also already part of some countries' national plans. For example, Malaysia, they announced a national plan on bioenergy. I think it's a roadmap they published, I think, a couple of years ago. And the idea is to leverage on the sheer amount of feedstock, palm oil, for example, and other bioenergy sources. Forestry, and forest is also one thing we have been thinking about in terms of biomass for power generation. And of course, to stretch the definition of bioenergy a little bit further, it is the idea of circular economy, where we try to make use of waste, either agricultural waste, food waste, whatever waste, and convert them into energy in the incineration plant, where we can get more juice out of the same feedstock. So yeah, sorry, initiatives that is in the region. And I think where Daniel was saying about the Spanish company's interest, I think is quite well aligned with what the region is looking at. We talk about ASEAN energy transition. Very often, of course, people think about mitigating climate change and getting to net zero. But we should also recognize the fact that there is a lot of emphasis on energy security in ASEAN. And of course, while we are trying to achieve this net zero pathway, we also need to make sure we continue to have access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy. So this is also where nuclear energy come into the picture. 5 ASEAN countries already announced interest. And in fact, we consider these 5 countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam, are on the front runners of nuclear energy development in ASEAN. So the key concern is that, while nations are looking to decarbonize their power systems or energy systems, affordability, energy security, and making sure that there is a proper diversification from the base load supply. And by that definition, we want 24/7 carbon-free energy access. And so nuclear energy checks all the boxes. And this is why countries are now increasingly interested. For example, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and even Singapore announced plans to consider nuclear energy in the longer term.
And I think because you mentioned energy security and the importance it has for the energy transition to be accomplished successfully in the region. And in Europe, we have a lot of experience in, let's say, developing energy security strategies, most specifically following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, since the European industry was very dependent on Russian gas. And the countries that have not diversified their energy portfolios were very badly injured. The economies were very weakened following the invasion. And for instance, we can be proud about Spain, who was less dependent on this kind of energy and was more resilient thanks to the renewable capacity. And that led to our country being the fastest growing large economy in the European Union, thanks precisely to the renewable capacity and the autonomy that it gives to our country's economy.
Yeah, and we very much want to see that manifesting in ASEAN as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to piggyback off of what Daniel said. The blackout that happened in April 28th this year in the Iberian Peninsula. Could you speak to that? Because there's been a lot of politicizing and finger pointing as to what the cause was, who is to blame. What are your thoughts on that? I know it's still under investigation in Spain, but what are your thoughts on that and kind of this finger pointing, politicizing game that we've been seeing?
The first technical report done by a group of European experts from the European Union. One of the first conclusions is that of the report is that we shouldn't blame renewable energies to be the cause of the blackout. I mean, it's true that the weight of the renewable energy, solar and wind, in at the moment before the blackout was about 70%. But that's something that is happening in Spain already in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's not uncommon to have 70% contributing to the system at some moments of time, especially during the day, when the solar is more powerful. First conclusion is that we shouldn't blame the renewables because of their instability, to be the cause of the system. And we should look at as well to the management system. That is the government company called Red Eléctrica de España. They are the one responsible for the management of the system. At that moment, before the blackout, there was some of the plants that were disconnected. But we don't know exactly the reason why those plants were disconnected. And that will be the second part of the report that we hope to be published very soon.
That'll be interesting to find out what caused that disconnection. Thank you for clearing that up, that renewables are not the cause of the blackout. I think that's important to repeat. I also wanted to follow up on something else. When you were talking about nuclear and some of the Spanish companies, Victor, you were involved in another panel discussion about the nuclear supply chain. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. So among some of the discussions about trying to help, the ASEAN regional countries go nuclear, I think the key thing is not just about the nuclear reactor. you also need to have the proper engineering expertise, the proper supply chain, in order to really support you for a proper nuclear power program, or we call it a sustainable nuclear power program in the next 50 to 100 years. And this is where you need engineering partners. You need engineering consultants who is able to help you with design, independent assessment of the technology that is most suitable for you. You need to have then the whole fleet around the supply chain of nuclear critical equipment. As simple as the pumps and valves they're making, and also pressure vessels, you need suppliers. And this is where the engineering expertise on the supply chain is very much needed. And this is where people, countries could look into Spain, where they have decades of nuclear experience in manufacturing to really help support that industrial economy of nuclear energy. And then it also needs to be part of the national strategy when they design a nuclear power program to, of course, evaluate what really is the most appropriate design of a long-term nuclear supply chain, in the context of that country, choosing the partners, choosing the vendors, and then eventually looking to the future from, for example, life cycle of nuclear power plant management to then the fuel cycle management. So it's a lot more that a country needs to look into. And this is where selecting the right partner becomes really critical.
Spain has been using nuclear energy for more than 40 years. And so there's a lot of expertise across the entire value chain. And now there's growing interest in SMRs as in other ASEAN countries. So we believe that government and non-government conversations on the possibility of deploying SMRs in ASEAN is very important. So that's why we organize activities to let the Spanish companies know about the nuclear opportunities in ASEAN.
Are there any case studies on any of the specific Spanish companies that will be attending the summit that you want to tell us any more about?
Okay, yes, I think the best example for the companies joining our business summit is the EDP Renewables. The headquarters of the group is in Lisboa, in Portugal, EDP, but the renewable affiliate company is established in Spain, and they have 1,500 employees in Spain. So that's the reason we always consider EDP Renewables a Spanish company. So this company is leading flagship projects such as installations in ports, schools, industrial complexes in Singapore, but they also have some floating solar system, especially in the Johor Strait, and self-consumption solutions for commercial buildings. And more interesting is that they are participating in public programs promoting self-consumption, like Solar Nova, and collaborating with local entities in the deployment of distributed solar solutions with smart storage. And one example is in Pulau Ubin.
In Singapore's larger plan to become net zero in 2050, since its potential for solar PV is not that large, given its small space, the limited territory, the plans of the country include importing solar energy from Indonesia. This company, DPR, has been awarded one of the biggest contracts to deploy solar PV capacity in Indonesia and then import, or I would say export, this energy to Singapore. So this also serves as a clear example of how bilateral collaboration between countries inside ASEAN is key for the energy transition.
What are some of the main challenges that Spanish companies face when they're trying to enter or expand in the ASEAN clean energy markets? Is it regulatory challenges, financial, cultural?
Yeah, I would say the three of them.
Okay.
There are some regulatory challenges, of course. Uncertainty in some countries is always a concern, especially when the energy policies are quite different across ASEAN countries. And this can of course, damage further investment and discourage renewable deployment. The financial is also a challenge, the financial barriers. Many projects require blended financing or strong guarantees to attract the international players. And this situation can be solved And we work a lot with the participation of multilateral organizations such as ASEAN Development Bank or the World Bank. And then the cultural dimension, no? The business practices, timelines, decision-making processes, they can differ from what the Spanish companies are used to. And that said, well, I think these challenges are not unsurmountable. I think with the right local partners and strong institutional support, we have seen a lot of companies that can succeed.
There are some times that it's not only regulatory, but non-regulatory barriers. And specifically in this sector where the investments are large, sometimes there can be some protectionism from local companies, which is obviously a barrier that foreign companies that may have larger or stronger expertise have to tackle. So the engagement with the local energy players must be done very, very carefully.
You already mentioned that you're working with organizations like the Asian Development Bank, correct? But are there any other diplomatic frameworks, such as the EU-ASEAN agreements or bilateral partnerships that are helping foster clean energy, clean tech collaboration in the region that you can tell us about?
Yes, the European Union has signed a comprehensive air transport agreement with ASEAN to develop these kind of solutions that help the energy transition. And also in the context of the EU Green Deal, where the goal is to be net zero in the 2050 decade. And this develops a framework for cooperation with foreign partners, such as ASEAN. I mean, the European Union is, in fact, I think, the second largest investor into Singapore and into ASEAN in general. So given the large investments that are being planned on energy, this is quite a topic that is very looked upon in the European Union. Regarding Singapore, the new European Union and Digital Trade Agreement is going to help the deployment of, for example, green technologies that enable the energy transition.
And how do embassies and commercial offices like yours help smooth the path for these collaborations?
Well, we do a mix of the diplomacy and business development,
Mhm.
both.
Okay.
So we help the Spanish companies understand the market, to identify reliable partners, navigate regulatory matters, and connect with decision makers in general. So sometimes we organize trade missions or public events. Other times we do discrete introductions, and always with the aim of long-term relationship building. So I think you should see us as a bridge, and not just between countries, but between people and ideas as well.
And what excites you the most about the future of Spain-ASEAN cooperation on sustainability? And have you noticed any emerging trends or technologies that you're particularly keen on?
Well, we are very, very excited about here in Singapore, the convergence of digital and green technologies.
Okay.
What some people call the twin transition.
Okay.
Whether it's smart grids or AI-driven energy management or circular economic platforms. And those are areas in which Spain and ASEAN can really innovate together.
There's new news on the green and digital maritime corridor. So we know that the maritime sector is one of the most difficult to decarbonize. And there's a lot of initiatives here in Singapore to connect with European ports, such as Rotterdam in the Netherlands. But we're also trying to push Spanish ports into this initiative to connect these two types of technologies, right? Digital and green, to make it less carbon intensive, but also more efficient. And that then, of course, we have ASEAN Power Grid, which I believe is going to play a key role given the investments that are estimated and the potential to connect the entire ASEAN in the energy system.
What I want to echo what you said, Daniel, is exactly about the cooperations in ports between Singapore and Spain. I think really the green marine fuel or the sustainable marine fuel, as what we recently published as a policy brief, talking about what needs to be done, how do we do it, is very important. Because if you think about the distance ships traveling between Singapore and Spain, they definitely need to do refueling at one of these ports. And if let's say really we're talking about green ammonia or green methanol, if the refueling is done in Singapore on green ammonia, then that means that ship also needs to refuel green ammonia in Spain, right? So that also enables more way where Singapore and Spain can collaborate or cooperate on green fuel development. You mentioned about data center. Actually, that's more how should I call it? AI and energy goes in the same way to improve efficiency that Antonio referred to, right? At the same time, the more AI you have, that means you need to build more data centers, and hence you are going to increase the energy consumption. It goes back to the same issue about energy security and enough supply of renewable energy. So this is where I think also we're hoping to see more collaborations between Spain and Singapore, to develop AI data center at the same time renewable energy or green energy.
And also, in apart from the maritime sector, I think aviation is also key. I mean, all these kind of sectors where international collaboration is key, and you cannot decarbonize only from one side, right? I mean, we talked about ports, but also in aviation regarding sustainable aviation fuels. There's a lot of incentives and regulatory obligations in the European Union to start using sustainable aviation fuels, and these kind of obligations are beginning to take root in ASEAN. This has a lot of infrastructure behind, as well as a lot of, for example, we talked about feedstock before, and a lot of technology side obligations. And we think that it's also one of the sectors in which collaboration between ASEAN and the European Union will be key.
We have one interesting JV, joint venture, between one Singaporean Indonesian company, Apical Golden Eagle,
Okay.
and a Spanish company, Moeve. They have already started the building of a biofuel plant, about $1 billion in Spain, to produce SAF for Spanish airlines.
And also biofuels.
And also biofuels, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And also going back to the decarbonization of the maritime sector and to the Spanish-Singapore Business Summit, one of the companies that's coming, for example, is Acciona Nordex Wind Hydrogen, which is a joint venture between Acciona and Nordex for the construction and development of green hydrogen plants in off-grid areas. So they are coming to Singapore because it's one of the biggest hub in the maritime sector, and so they want to engage with local stakeholders such as shipping lines or the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization to see whether there is room for collaboration and partnerships to these kind of projects that they are going to develop in the next few years.
Yeah, this sounds like an amazing event. And maybe we'll drop the link in the comment section or something so people can register.
Absolutely. We'll do that. And once again, that's Wednesday, 16th July, 2025, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Pan Pacific Hotel. We will share the information so you can register to that. Any last thoughts that you would like them to take away from Spain's commitment to supporting a sustainable future in the region?
Yeah, I would like to say that Spain is here for the long term. I mean, we are not just offering products, no, but we really offer partnership, and partnership based on shared values and mutual benefit. So our companies here are ready to co-create solutions. They are also willing to invest into local communities and especially contribute to a more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient ASEAN.
And we're excited about what the future is going to bring and to see if this promise of decarbonization can be actually deployed.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure speaking with both of you. And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you very much, and see you at the Spain Business Summit.
Let's keep this conversation going.